October 18th, council work session. We're meeting this morning and we got a couple items on our agenda. We got the local option service and sales tax fiscal year end report, and then we got budget, some debt management discussion. So Scott, I'll quickly kick it over to you and let's get going. I know that there's a few of us that have some obligations today, so.
Yes, so Mayor, Council, good morning. I had a couple topics here for Nick and Joe Brandstetter to go through with you. It's that time of year where we finished up another year of local option sales tax projects, so they're going to go through that first. And then secondly, there's been some questions about the capital improvement plan and some desires to add some projects in the next cycle there. And we want to make sure we set the stage properly with those conversations about where some of our constraints are within the debt service management. And there are definitely some constraints that we have to be aware of and work through. So I'd ask Joe and Nick with finance to help explain that situation. So I'll let them take over from here. Thanks.
Okay. Honorable Mayor, Honorable Mayor and council members, you have in front of you the report, I think that was sent to you on Friday. And I'm just going to kind of go through kind of the high level of what that report kind of lays out for what our expenses were for the fiscal year 2021, which was affected by COVID. As you can kind of see from the report that got sent out, the actual revenues that were received during the year were 34.4, and of that, we did break out all the different expenditure categories that you guys highlighted for the council expenditure policy for the local option. And of that, 50% is required for property tax relief. And we actually spent 51% in this current the fiscal year that ended June 30 of 21. And then it also breaks out into street improvements and flood prevention. That's the $5 million that goes into our capital projects for street projects, as well as this year we had the last half of the stormwater piece as well in there for the citywide study, and then some additional projects that we started to fund there, which total almost 19%. The next area is the neighborhood improvements, where we had 10%. We've got a very broad list of different items under the neighborhood improvements that made up the 10%, and then 4% for the public safety improvements and expenditures. The rest goes into either a designated reserve that carries over from year to year, depending on the program, or just the regular financial reserves that we try to maintain. What we're trying to do is make sure we have about 9 to 10 million, which is about 20% for a financial reserve, because local option sales tax can vary a lot from one year to the next. With the report, it shows that we went from 38 down to 34, so we want to make sure that we can sustain a year or two of ups and downs if we see them. The next slide kind of talks about the biggest piece of it, obviously, is the property tax relief. This slide indicates what we had in our most recent CIP plan that was approved back in March, and where our total tax rate is with that CIP plan. And then the blue area is what has been, or what is projected, or what was projected for the last CIP plan, and what that local option sales tax was able to do. So the first year, when you guys did lower the property tax rate, that 60 cents with the local option sales tax, we did save the tax rate by $1.02, where we would have had to go versus where we actually ended up. And you can kind of see that it's definitely grown. The current fiscal year we're in is fiscal year 22. We did stay at that 1661, and based off of all the projects that we're doing and the asset match that we do on our bond issuances that we started once we got local option sales tax, would have been a savings in '22 by $1.84 in that fiscal year. And as you can kind of see with our current, we're still working on this next budget cycle for the fiscal year '23, but I wanted to kind of show you what was last approved in the CIP plan. As I kind of talked about before, we've got the property tax relief, which is a true 50% calculation of what we actually receive through the fiscal year. And then the other component on that was Neighborhood Development Corp. We actually did make a contribution to them beyond the $1 million for some special projects that they did for us on that. So, one of the big focuses here on the streets is that $5 million a year that we've allocated towards streets. There was several street projects that we did across the entire city. The local option report details out all of those on that. I'm not going to go through those specifically. The stormwater improvements, we did, there's two different components that make up that $1.5 million. The $550,000 is the second piece of the citywide study, which should be, I believe, wrapping up, if it has not already wrapped up, but will be summarized for the council. And then that kind of gives us where we're going to move forward with additional projects for stormwater improvements. The $1 million that makes up of that is a loan payback back to the general fund. So to avoid debt, we borrowed $9 million from the general fund, and the local option sales tax is paying the general fund back that $1 million for 9 years so it's basically an interest-free loan from the general fund to stormwater to be able to get some of these projects going faster. And then the flood prevention buyouts is in this designated reserve. This is $400,000. There was none spent this past fiscal year, but it's one of the designated reserves amounts. So this amount is continually going to accumulate until they have the ability to take voluntary purchases or some of the flood buyouts in 4 Mile or other areas of the city that are in the floodplain. We have in the past as well, but this is one where we're trying to put forth some additional funding. To get all of the houses out of floodplain areas is around $30+ million. And so this is trying to allocate some on a regular basis for voluntary purchases if possible. We also have some stormwater SRF funds for sponsored projects that are going towards this too. We have, I think, at least $1 million going from that as well. So there's a bunch of different avenues that we use for purchasing properties within the floodplain. This is just one component of that. Within the neighborhood improvements, we've got 4 major areas that we had spend in this current fiscal year 21. The special investment districts, that's the Invest DSM contributions that we have through that organization that we have, as well as the property improvement program, which that kind of started off during the fiscal year 21, and we're trying to get through that process with neighborhood services and go through that. The neighborhood matching grant program is one that was kind of piloted through originally through Invest DSM, and then we did something very similar with this neighborhood matching grant. It was very successful. This actually was one that was a carryover from last year, and so they've spent last year's funds and this year's funds within the fiscal year 21. And then, of course, the expanded library hours. The calculation off of that is how many hours that they needed to be able to do the extended hours for all the different libraries that came back that additional day.
We keep spending that amount out of the sales taxes?
Yes. That is the current plan.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about the neighborhood matching grants?
I'm not as familiar with that particular project, but I know that we
It's a challenge
work.
grant.
Excuse me?
Challenge grants.
Yeah. So it allowed different neighborhoods to apply for matching grants where we can kind of show that they've made a contribution in the betterment of the neighborhoods.
It was for all the city but the 4 targeted neighborhoods.
Just that there was a tremendous amount of interest in that program, and we did tweak it slightly for the citywide. I think it might have been lowered to like maybe five neighbors being able to get together.
I think it was
We
still
can-
10.
Was it
No,
still
it
10?
was-
It was 10.
Okay.
It was
5
still-
to 10.
It was a lower amount for 5.
Yeah, but if you, lower amount of dollars.
Oh,
And
right.
if you got to 10, you get 2,500,
Right.
I believe.
Okay, I don't think the 5 was advertised. I never saw anything on the website. I know what I've just heard some comments about that from neighbors, that, you know, it's not necessarily going to people that need the help. I mean, a lot of these people already have plenty of money and could do it themselves, but they're just taking advantage of the free money, which I don't know whether it's right or wrong or anything else. I've just heard comments that they're concerned that it's going to homeowners that probably don't really need it.
Well, we can.
I don't know, what that means.
Yeah, we can report out where those projects were and the details behind that. Understand that it's also an opportunity for the neighbors to get together.
Yeah.
I've gotten quite a few comments positive that, I didn't really know my neighbors before, but when these
Yep.
projects came along, they were able to actually group together nicely.
And it just had to be 10 neighbors that you could look out your front window and see. Step out on your front porch and you would have to see them. And I've just heard a little bit of objection about that, but that's just comments that I've heard from neighborhood meetings.
Well, so if we do this again next year, some of the neighborhood associations that maybe weren't on board previously, they could get organized and use those dollars in another year. Is that
And
correct?
it's,
Yeah, it's supposed
it's
to be
been raised to
Like
two,
law.
200,000 a year. Yep.
with the interest that we saw, we've raised that to 200,000 a year.
Okay.
It was a 100,000 originally, and then with the interest that we saw that needed to.
Would you
kind of go
just
up.
verify that there's information on the website that's for 5 houses? Because this is the first I've ever heard of 5. I know I've been in neighborhood meetings where InvestDSM has talked about it, and they've said 10 or 12. So this is the first I've ever heard about 5. I don't know if they, okay.
5 has been the discussion, but they get less when it's 5.
Right, so I
And
think
if
it's
they
more
get
because
10,
if you
they
get 10, you get
they
the
more.
matching up to 2,500. And it's really for just outside your house, it's for your front, it's for the
Yeah,
front
I
appearance. so-
understand that.
So how are we getting the word out to all
Well,
the
I
neighbors?
think we put out, I don't know if they had
Is it
a,
on our one source that we mail to everybody, or what are we doing to?
I've never seen
notify all the
anything for
neighborhoods.
5 houses. Every meeting I've ever been to.
I think
it's
they
been
directed them to go to the website to sign up and get because it went through the InvestDSM to.
Yeah, it was managed by InvestDSM for us.
So
that
it'd be the
grant
same
program.
as what the Block Challenge grant was for.
Al, do you know what the neighborhood?
Was it on the city website? That's my question. I know the 10 was, but I don't remember ever seeing anything about 5.
We pushed
on
a
the-
lot of that out on social media through Facebook, our Facebook page, and that information got out through there. We did it through our neighborhood e-newsletter, at least a couple of months in a row.
So is it just on, is that our main way of getting the word out to the neighborhoods, is just social media? And, I mean, are we going to put anything in that one source that goes to everybody's house, or what's the plan?
We have put it in there before.
You have?
And it'll go out on City Source. Actually, an update about the program will be in the upcoming
I think it
City
was so
Source.
new and it came up so
Right.
quickly that this is the only way you could really get it out. But they're going forward, if we know that it's going to be this time during the year, and we've got this much money, they can get it out ahead of time. I know I've been talking about it, and everybody's like, that we'll get more information out.
It was talked about at a council meeting a couple
Yeah.
of
So I
months
think
ago
we,
as well.
if we have it scheduled, this is what we're going to do for next year, we'll have better opportunity to get the information out.
But I want to see it on the city website.
It is.
It's on the city website, the program guidelines, if you click the program guidelines on the city website.
For 5 houses, does it say that?
Specifically says 5.
Good, okay.
So it's on there, and actually, I was at an NFC meeting, and the neighborhood folks, the neighborhood representative on there actually knew it was 5 from the city website. So some folks know about it, not everyone. One of the things I would like to see that I think could be an improvement for the block grant challenge, I mean, I'd like to see an equity piece of that, and one of the pieces I was thinking is maybe reserve a certain amount for previously redlined neighborhoods would be a way to help with that. I mean, that isn't necessarily the only way. I'd be open to other ideas, but I think as we prepare the budget for next year, we should think about that equity piece to Lynn's
I like
point.
that.
And like I said, the red line might be a way to do that. There could be other ways, but we don't need to make the whole program for that, but just a piece of it so that we make sure that it's getting spread around the entire city.
Or if we did it to low mod income,
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, your average income or
There's
low
going to be some
mod.
overlap in those.
Right.
Yeah, there's, even within the house,
There are multiple ways to do it, so I'm not wedded to any one way.
I would just like to see something put in there to
Yeah.
make it more equitable.
The next area is the public safety improvements and expenditures. From there, there's 2 categories. The firefighter positions, what those were 13 positions that we retained after the end of a grant to be able to maintain those positions. And then the other piece is the mobile mental health crisis grants. We are currently, is it negotiations right now with Broad Lawns on a program for mental health, and so that'll actually start being used in this current fiscal year. And I believe it's either this tonight's council meeting or the next one. I think it's going to be brought up, I think. So as we went through that, the designated reserves are based off of the flood.
Can we go back to the firefighters for 1 second?
Absolutely.
So are we at authorized strength with allocating this money?
It's 2 different topics.
2 different topics, yep.
Yeah, so these funds are paying for 13 of the firefighters, and the general fund is picking up the rest.
Yep.
The authorized strength is the issue of, we're still 19, we are currently 19 vacancies under the authorized strength. So the hiring process is such that they are doing interviews, final interviews, the next couple of weeks. And actually, within the next few days, we'll be sharing with you what the anticipation is for the number that will be in this next academy.
Is that going to be, well, I guess all of us, or a number of us, are anticipating 30, and if...
No, 30 will not be likely the recommendation. We'll be talking through what the actual numbers are. My understanding is that there has been some communication about some insistence of a number 30. I've not seen anything with that recommendation that shows that that is actually number driven for what we need to accomplish within the fire department. And so we are going to lean forward and hire more than the current vacancies, the 19 that is under authorized strength at the moment. We will be hiring more than that. So give us just a few more days here, and you'll have that communication as to what that actual number will be.
But Scott, do you acknowledge the email that I sent last week?
Yes.
And I've sent it to, I think, everybody
Sure.
on the council, that with the upcoming retirements that are planned for next year, I mean, there's some pretty compelling evidence that we need
We need more than the 19.
That we need.
That's absolutely correct.
That we need, actually, I think the number's 30.
Yeah, no, the number 30 is an arbitrary number that someone has chosen and kind of thrown out there. I've never seen anything that actually specifies why 30 is a special number. And so you will get the analysis that shows where we need to be and how we're going to get there with
So are you talking
additional.
more than 30 then?
Not likely, no.
So
No.
are you including a pre-certified class also with that?
That has still been the discussion
I
as
wonder if none of
well.
us are interested in the pre-certified class, then what would the number be?
If you were not interested. So historically, it would still be around 25, because you would always look at the current vacancies and go above that by 5 to 7. And so the pre-certified is a great opportunity to come in mid-cycle next spring, late spring, and hire additional that would then only need about 2.5 months worth of training. So they would be available in like September of '23. So we can.
If you have the applicants.
Yes, yes, correct. That's true.
But Scott,
So
here's,
we,
September 23 or 22?
22, this next
You
September.
said 23. I just
I'm
wanted
sorry.
to make
Thank
sure.
you.
I guess I just would like to have a conversation, because
Yes.
I know in 2015, we've got that study where it was clear that our response times were not where we would desire. And we said that we were always going to be hiring more firefighters. Here we are 6 years later, and we have apparatus that is out of service every
Sure,
single
sure.
day. I mean, how can we possibly open Station 11? All we're doing is pulling from other stations. It means that somebody else is going to be short an apparatus to put them in 11. That's not really solving
So,
anything. I mean, our city has grown. We're servicing a lot more people today than we did 6 years ago.
yep, and we have more firefighters today than we did 6 years ago. We've added firefighters. The challenge we've got right at this moment is that we have 17 firefighters that are finishing up the academy that in December will be out in the fire stations. That will lower the overtime usage and get us much closer to the authorized strength that are actually in operations, and allow for that apparatus and the new station to be fully staffed. The question is, how often will the second piece of apparatus in the new fire station be manned? That may not always be the case every day until we get this next academy through, and the pre-certified is the fastest way to get firefighters out into the stations.
But we've always had about this many number of firefighters every year that go through the classes. And we are continually short because of retirements. I mean, our firefighters are of the age where, we've got retirements, we've got injuries.
Sure.
People are out with injuries, whether they're work-related or not work-related, I don't know.
Yep.
But in any case, they're out, and every day, our fire staff is asked to do more and more with less. And I don't think anybody on this council wants that to continue.
Yep, so we are looking at the quickest way to get that resolved. And it's been talked about how the way to do that is twofold: to continue hiring more than what is currently vacant, and add this pre-certified process in the spring.
So I think if the pre-certified process had been here before, right now, we'd maybe have greater confidence in that. I think there's a desire, at least that's what I'm hearing from my colleagues, a desire to get caught up through this incoming class. And then going forward, the pre-certified may be the solution, but I think if the plan is not to come back with a class of 30, I would hope that you are prepared and interview and identify the additional folks to get up to 30, because there might be more specific direction that the council wants to provide.
Well, let's Let's talk about that when we have that then.
But since those decisions are going on right now, I think there'd be a number of us who would be pretty disappointed. I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but there'd be a number of us who would be pretty disappointed if that option is cut off from us in the either the communication or the interview process, whatever is going on right now. And that's very clearly, like, that's in staff's hands. Like, that's very much not something we're involved in. But I think the overall number and the expectation and the staffing level that we want to get to in the time frame of that, I think there's very much an interest in accomplishing that this class. And then going forward, because I think we're all a little frustrated that we're in this position now, going forward, that pre-certified needs to be a piece of the solution long-term so that next time we're not in this situation. And I think that's a way that everyone could be comfortable with that approach.
And Scott, my question is, the reason we're in this position is we're trying to save money? Is that what the concept is?
No.
I can't imagine that.
It is not.
But how did we end up in this? I mean, I would expect that the chief would come to you and say, we need to have this staffing, and you would probably say, we'll get to that. And I just, we knew Station 11's coming on. And I'm kind of upset that Station 9 has a vehicle out of service almost all the time. How did we, what I want to make sure is that we don't end up in this position again. So we need to analyze what went wrong and what are we going to do to fix it.
Yeah, so it sounds like maybe a secondary conversation about this specifically would be helpful.
I think so.
To bring this
I think
back.
we need a clarification so we have a full understanding. We hear 30, we hear the numbers of the retirements, we hear that it would be good to have it laid out. What is the projection? Is there a really strong projection on how many people are injured, going to retire, age bracket of where they're going to go? All that probably that makes the huge determination as to.
It does, and that would be number driven, and that
Right.
would be helpful.
How many were in the current class that we're getting 17 out? How many was started?
I would have to double check if there was one or two
I think 20.
that jumped out.
There was at least 20. So you lose about 20 to maybe 25% when you start. So
No, you would lose one or two a
Like
cycle.
10%.
That's 10 to 15
Yeah.
with that one. But
Yeah, but
it could get up to 20.
yeah, it's closer to that number. It's closer to the 20%. So if you started at 30, we're not going to get 30 people out of this class. Then you might be able to go back to your pre-certified idea. But if you don't start at 30, our confidence, and I think Josh laid it out pretty clear, and he's right, he can't speak for all of us, but I think the majority of us, our confidence, since we've never done the pre-certified class, isn't very strong. In the past history of the administration of the fire department and the direction that we've given him and the direction we're in right now, there's not a whole lot of confidence that we're going to get where we need to be. And that's the problem as it sits, Scott. And you can lay it out as nicely as possible in any other way, but I don't believe that hiring less than 30 is going to be significant out of this class. You have 46 people that have been through the civil service. You need to,
That's made through, yep.
yeah, you need to pick 30 of them, get them trained, get them hired, and let's see how many we got. And going forward, then let's look at the pre-certified class.
Yeah, because we should have been the certified.
We should never be in this position. That's the struggle through the whole
Someplace
thing.
else, right?
We should never, ever be in the position that we're in. We've known Station 11 was going to open years ago. We've, yes, COVID hit. There was a delay in hiring for one cycle, but we should never be in the position that we're in, where we're paying time and a half and double time now to try to get everything in service. And by the way, we probably wouldn't be doing that if it wasn't brought to everyone's attention, because the administration didn't tell you that we were in that bad of shape as far as staffing, did they? Because when it was brought to your attention, You didn't know anything about it.
So it was worse than what had been discussed before.
Right.
And part of that is the daily vacancies due to leaves is higher than it's historically been as well. That's not the full reason, but that compounded the situation.
And injuries.
That's what I'm talking about, injuries and unknown leaves that were,
But I don't think it's fair to blame that all on the firefighters. I think when we ask our men.
none of it should be. Yeah.
Okay, but when we ask our men and women to work all this extra time, we're going to have a higher instance of injuries. It's just not fair to those firefighters that are out there working every single day to be in the situation where we have rigs out of service, where they're working and then right away get called back in again. That's not how we want our firefighters to have, we don't want them working under those conditions. I don't, anyway.
And going back to our presentation here, we've allocated funds for that through the local option sales tax.
And an ability to do more.
Right, and ability to do more. And so for you to push back to say, we don't need 30 this time, I'm challenged by those statements.
So you asked a question earlier. Within this cycle of the academy, the normal cycle, and the pre-certified, we're looking at about 38 as the total.
Well,
And
great.
so about 25 in this cycle and another 13 or 14 in the pre-certified is likely to be within one or two of each of those cycles is likely to be, because you'll get then actually ahead of authorized strength by September-ish of this year and not have to wait till January of '23 when the full year of training
Right,
is done.
and I guess what we're saying is we know we've done classes that have approached that 30 before. We're less confident about the pre-certified because we haven't used that before. We want to make sure that we get to that full number, so let's do 30 in the class. Let's see if we can make that additional 8, it sounds like, work from the pre-certified number. And then let's use those tools to not end up in that situation in the future.
I like that.
If I gave you the confidence that there was going to be 15 pre-certified coming from other fire stations and that you'd have them 4 to 5 months sooner than the other class, would that get you comfortable with?
Well, why don't we?
Because that's the same thing
Why
I'm
wouldn't we
going
hire the 30, and then if you're saying you're going to get 38, if we lose 10% of them, or if we lose 20% of them, then all of a sudden you can make that class what you're looking at 12 or 13 at the pre-certified level, then we all win.
Well, no, so for 4 or 5 months, you're waiting to
I
get,
think we would have been comfortable
Yeah, it
if
would
the
be okay.
pre-certified had been tried before now.
Yeah.
But given where we're at, I think that there are several of us, well, again, I don't want to speak for my colleagues.
You're
but-
speaking for me, you're
but-
fine.
But there are those of us who will only be comfortable with the 30 right now. And then going forward, if you make this pre-certified work, then we'll be comfortable when you come back to us and say pre-certified. But the fact that it has gotten to this point, we're I think, pretty firm on the 30.
So where are the pre-certified? Have they applied within that 46, or have we not even gone out for them?
no, that process has only been discussed, and there's already
So,
been
I
feedback.
want clarity.
There's already been
Okay.
feedback from other fire department chiefs of concern that they're going to lose 3, 4, or 5 firefighters
Yeah.
from each of those other fire departments. So I'm starting to get that confidence myself that we'll have the 12 to 15 pretty easily with the pre-certified. But I do understand that, having not done that before,
Yeah,
that's a very real concern. So we'll bring this back with the further detail
But
Scott, two things.
before the decision's made on the.
Right, I think there are those of us who want to weigh in, and if it would require formal council action to get the decision that we're interested in seeing,
Yeah.
we're willing to make sure something gets on our next agenda, if that's what it
Let's
takes.
turn to Carl, please.
Yeah. It would be great at some point if we, have a chance to take a deeper dive into what our authorized number ought to be? I mean, if, because
Right.
the number of calls, so I don't want to leave that discussion behind. I don't know if there's how we get to that determination, but just to review, based on our growing population and especially the number of EMT calls, is this the right number?
Yeah, yeah. That's great. We will bring that back through the budget process, and you are going to see a recommendation that increases that authorization.
Also,
apply for a safer grant then?
Depending on how that, yes, we can. Understand the expectations are that that's simple growth in a community is typically not a good reason to receive a safer grant. It's
But-
typically a loss where a fire department has taken a hit and lost several firefighters in trying to regain that. And so we can put in an application for safer grant, but I just don't want that expectation. That's not the normal reason why you would get a safer grant. Like what we got before for our safer grant was rebuilding a workforce that we had to cut due to budgets in the previous years.
Okay.
That's not the situation.
And
Well-
maybe it needs to be in the budget.
for like 2 years.
Correct.
I'd say
Correct.
we probably qualify now.
I think that the general public assumes that if there's equipment at a station, that those rigs are being staffed, and I think,
We definitely
Yeah,
need to have that conversation as
Yeah.
part of this, because that is not always the case.
right,
There is definitely additional equipment at a lot of the fire stations that is there as needed and not always staffed 24/7, and that's purposefully, so that you have enough staff to go to the type of calls that are out there with the right equipment to address those issues. So sometimes that will mean having additional apparatus and other equipment in the stations ready to go, but you don't necessarily have everything staffed 24/7 because you won't need those types of equipment at all times. The biggest of the ladder trucks, the specialty equipment, and some of that doesn't necessarily make sense to have staffed 24.
well, it's comforting when you drive by a station that the doors are up and say, oh,
Yep.
we got equipment here, we just don't have the
We're going
the
to
staff to operate everything,
We're
so.
going to need to educate our constituents on that.
I
And
agree.
that's not going to probably come from any of us to be a cheerleader for that type of, if that's the direction you're going to go.
We'll provide you with that.
Yeah, you can provide whatever, but as an elected official, public safety is our number one concern, telling our constituents, hey, there's a ladder truck there, but it's not going to be staffed, so we're not sure why it's there, but if you need it, you know what, we're going to get some staff in there. Scott, politically, or just being right as far as telling and their taxpayers coming and paying us to have these things in place, that is not going to fly. At least for me, I can't speak for the rest of you, but I'm not going to be able to go to any neighborhood, no matter what talking points you give, and tell them that. That's beyond what I was elected to tell anyone. And I don't know how anyone up here would be able to do that, no matter what talking points you give. Matter of fact, they're going to say, well, why are you buying trucks and more equipment if you don't have anybody to staff it? Why don't you save the money doing that and hire more firefighters?
To be clear, it's staffed if that's the apparatus that needs to be called into service, so yeah, okay. Well, definitely need to bring back the additional information before the decision on the staffing and the hiring is done. We can do that. That's just a couple days.
Speaking of the
That's
other
just a couple
side of
days
it,
away.
how is on the police, because they're under their authorized amount too?
Yeah, so they
So
have
are
just
we
started
beefing up those
recruitment.
classes too?
What was that last
I
question?
mean, are we beefing up their classes to try to get up to the number? So
There is a similar process that finance assists with when, right at the point where they're ready to hire a new academy, we know what the current vacancies are, and we do look at what the planned retirements. We have that pretty well known with public safety, because oftentimes they utilize that drop program and say, I'm going to retire 3 years out. And because of that, they get some benefits towards their retirement. So with both public safety departments, we do have typically a clearer understanding of retirements that are coming up, and we plan for that within the academy as well.
But COVID didn't affect their academy. It only affected the fire department, correct?
The
It was-
timing of such with
The police
yes.
department went ahead and did their hiring even through COVID.
Yes.
And went through the class, but the
Yes.
fire department
Yes.
hesitated for a
The-
few months and
The
didn't.
fire union asked us to hesitate on the fire. So that was communications with staff, because there was so much interactions that the fire department, the staff themselves get involved in the hiring or the recruitment process with the physical exams and whatnot. There was conversations between
I didn't know
staff
that
and
the union
management.
made the decision for the administration,
They don't.
Okay.
Where there was input given in.
but ultimately the decision was made by the administration to.
Absolutely,
okay.
absolutely.
And if that's the case, then we should be playing catch-up. And
Yes.
if we delayed it, then
Yes.
that's all the more reason. Because I know when I visited with administration, I was told, well, because of COVID. To me, that's not really a reason not to have our fully staffed fire department. And if we're going to use COVID, then I say, let's hire the additional staff to make up for it. Let's play catch-up.
Yes, we're definitely playing catch-up. All right, quite a few questions there. We will bring back that additional information before the hiring.
Back to the public safety expenditures, there's an item on our budget, I think, where do the body cameras come in? Because that's a lost
Future.
expenditure.
Yep, that's actually within this in the 22.
That's in the 22.
That's this current fiscal year.
So for the 22, we're going to have the firefighter positions, the mobile crisis, plus the body cameras.
Yep. Yep. And with the neighborhood, that'll expand as well. Yep. We had to reevaluate 21 because of the loss in the COVID revenues. So we were anticipating having a lower expend in 21 because of the lower revenue that we were anticipating.
Okay, got it. So that's coming from the anticipated
Yep.
increases.
Yep, because from the state, we got a lower number for the 21, and so we kind of adjusted from there.
Got it. Okay, makes sense.
What do we anticipate the revenue coming in for lost?
For 22, I would say we're looking back at that north of 40 again. So it'll be back to pre-COVID levels from what we've gotten from the state so far. So, but we still have a variable of not knowing the November reconciliation that they do for 21. So that's still a variable that we don't have at this point.
So are we taking that into consideration? That you're going to.
For the budget cycle?
Yeah, for the budget cycle,
Absolutely.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, beyond public safety, for all,
For all.
that additional sales tax will come in handy for the capital improvement plan and what we talk about here in the next conversation,
Yep.
the debt management.
But these are all different topics that we kind of take in consideration through our budget process, and we're bringing this as what we've done through 21, and we're taking that forward through when we plan for the next budget as well as the CIP budget as well, as we put this together.
All right.
So the other piece is the reserve. The designated reserve, again, is made up of two different programs, one of which is the flood property buyouts, and the other one is the mobile crisis that makes up the 1.2. The financial reserve is at 17.7, and so what we're anticipating is a 21 of some use of that, because my goal is to about the 20%, roughly 20% reserve, so that we can get a couple down years to be able to be covered. And that's all I have for the local option sales tax report. Any questions?
Nick, I've got one. I saw under the mental health, had a $200,000 reserve. I think when we put the ballot out for vote, we were earmarking $400,000.
We basically, based off of conversations that we've had through that process, we were building up to it. So we did 200, 200, and then in '22, it should be at that 400 level of what we've allocated. Yep,
Okay.
We haven't used any of the 200 yet, have we?
No.
we have not.
No,
Right.
they're just putting it in.
And yeah, Connie and I have been working with this River Bend group, and it's kind of appalling that we've got one person in mental health crisis at the police department, and it's not even staffed 24
We
hours.
have two now.
There too.
We have-
I thought they weren't up to 2 yet.
No, they've got
Just
two.
Okay.
several months is all.
All right. But
And I think
for a
they
city our
really
size,
four.
2,
There were supposed to be 3 coming, but I think, and Lauren, if we could have 4, it would be great. As long as if we're talking budget. I think to have it adequately staffed, they said it'd be great to have 4. But definitely we need more than 2.
right. Okay.
And then we also have the clinicians that they're trying to hire that's with Broadlawns too in Polk County, or just Broadlawns.
So you'll see that in the next council meeting, actually, that those contract negotiations are pretty much done. They just need to get the word,
They said they were having trouble for that 24, or for the night shifts.
the hiring.
hiring.
But
And is
Scott,
this
is
for
it
a-
with Broadlawns or is it with other providers? Because the meetings that I go to, Broadlawns is there, but there's a significant
Sure.
group of other providers that are there that are
Yep.
throwing out options as well. I'm somewhat frustrated that
Yeah.
after
So-
implementing this initiative 4 years ago plus, we still don't seem to have a
So Mayor, yes.
agreement on where we're going here.
That is accurate. The conversations and meetings that the mayor and I have attended, and some of the others as well on the council, there are essentially 4 stages of the mental health assistance that's needed, and the city is involved in the very first 2, which is the calls that come in. That could be a 911 call. It could be a call from a crisis center call that gets transferred to our 911. That's the first phase. The second phase is actual response out to the site. That's our mobile crisis unit. We now have 2, and we'll likely have 3 here fairly soon. And the use of the contract with Broadlawns in that second phase in the mobile crisis unit. So the police and the mobile crisis unit clinicians are able to respond together. We're looking at the opportunity to send that unit out when there is no safety aspect that's necessary, such that the police actually don't have to always respond within those calls. Those are the first 2 phases, and then what the mayor is talking about is that there is a 3rd and a 4th phase of the mental health that is the cooling station. They need a location to bring the individual and possibly family members to cool down and to get some clinician assistance. And then a long-term care program is that 4th phase. So we really do need the group the mayor has mentioned step up in the 3rd and 4th phase. Those are not city-type functions. We have 0 resources and staff dedicated to the actual mental health care after they've been brought into a facility. So we really do need our nonprofit partners to pick up the pace on their 3rd and 4th phases of those needs. Is that what you're?
And Scott, do we have our youth mobile crisis unit out there?
That's part of what you'll
Yes.
see, is
It's
there will be
Broadway.
clinicians that
That's what
are
we'll see.
specialized.
Haven't seen it yet, though.
Correct.
They've hired the people, from what I've been told, from Broadlawns, that Broadlawns has hired the people for the adolescent.
For both 24/7 and adolescent specialties.
But I just want to confirm that it is up and running.
It will be. It is not today.
Because to the mayor's point, it's been 4 years.
Yes. And we're doing our part. We
Yeah.
do need the others to come forward with contracts, so,
Okay.
yep.
The other thing is still working on the sobering center and where that would go with Polk County. That once people, because we would pick them up, and that would be countywide then to take if you're high or if you're drunk or someplace to go so you don't have to go to jail. but to see about getting him treatment from that angle forward.
Is Broadlawn still on board with that, or have they had a change in direction?
I have heard there might be a little bit of change of direction, but we're still working.
Okay.
So Mayor, I think we still have this
Yep.
topic that Nick,
Yeah, I'll try and go through this quick. The budget debt management is just kind of an overview of kind of talking through where we sit today as we start through the budget process, and kind of some of the different topics that we look at, and what kind of setting the stage for before we kind of go through and determine what gets added and how we approach our CIP budget this coming year, the capital improvement plan, program. Some of the different things I wanted to touch base with you guys today is dealing with the state debt limit, what we're required to stay within at the state level, and then what the council policy is at this point in time. Then to kind of give you a history of bonds that we've issued over the how many we've issued over the last several years, to kind of give you perspective as to how much we're issuing now versus maybe 7 years ago, as well as kind of show you what was in the last capital improvement plan of what we are going to be continuing, that large current plan that we have, and then what we have modeled for our long-term bond issuances going forward, and what that bond rating discussion that we had from our last bond issue that we just closed last month. From a state debt limit requirement, it is 5% of the 100% total valuation. What that means is not the taxable piece, it's actually the total valuation that limit is set as. So in recent years, there's been a change on the different rollbacks when you've got the 90% on the commercial industrial. That kind of changed the conversation to where that number, that limit is about the same, and the differentiation between the total valuation and the taxable is quite a bit different than it has been in the past. The council policy that the council has approved is actually utilizing 80% of the state debt limit. And when we look at this, we've come close to that in the past, and with our current plan, we'll get into kind of where we see that. We do look at valuations each year, and that percentage is, we have to kind of watch that because we're getting closer and closer in our projection of being over that 80%. So we'll have to look at that going forward to make sure we stay within that, or adjust that policy if needs be, if it's worth the projects that we have.
So in other words, it's just 4% of the total value?
Yes, that's what the council, yep. That's what the council has set as a limit. To give you example of what we have currently, so for the most completed fiscal year, audited fiscal year was 2020. And so this kind of puts it in perspective. We've got 14.3 billion of total valuation within Des Moines. That puts a limit of 716. So think of that as like your credit card limit. That's the most you can borrow at the state level. When you take that in consideration for what we actually had issued for general obligation bonds, and then what other debt we have that is subject to that limit, we still had technically another 204 that we could issue at the end of fiscal year 2020. We did, when we get into the history of issuance, you'll be able to see that we have some very large issues that we just did that is going to be taking away some of that funds. As of the fiscal year 2020, we did use almost 72% of our legal debt limit. So we were at that 70 mark at that point, and I think we're gradually moving up in that percentage.
I'm sorry,
So,
gradually moving what?
Moving up with that percentage.
Okay, so I remember years ago, prior to Scott and prior to Rick Clark being here, that previous city manager, we used to be at 60%. He moved it to 70 and popped that up very quickly, and then moved it to 80. And so I am always concerned as we begin to inch closer and closer to that 80, when I feel more comfortable where we are, and quite frankly, more at 70, with debt. And part of our local option sales tax was to avoid debt. And so I'm just trying to get comfortable with this idea that we're going to continue to move towards 80. I'm
And
not
that's,
sure that's a good policy, and it at least makes me a little queasy.
and that is one we always try to watch out for, of what percentage we're sitting at. And what we've seen as a valuation growth in this next year will affect these numbers that are in this presentation. But we don't know what the official valuation is at this point. But indications are kind of that it's a little bit higher than what we originally anticipated. And so what these numbers are based off of what the known values as of last March when we approved the budget. So when we get into this next slide, we are going to be north of that 80% in our projection, but the valuations will come into play first before it'll actually be that full utilization. We are at a very high capital improvement plan that is backed by debt service, and that is what the driver is. When we go through the history of bond issuances, we were on an annual basis issuing somewhere between 25 and 35 million a year. This last issuance that we just did, the 21 F and G, it was over 90. So we are having a very large capital improvement plan, and that means issuing more debt, which in turn means we're utilizing more of our debt limit.
But historically, we've never seen interest rates like they are right.
There is that in play as well.
It's going to continue,
Yes.
but
Yeah, I don't think Scott would have ever imagined issuing at under 1.2.
It's historic. It's
Yeah.
never been.
But we do, so this history of bond issuances, as you can see, we've got the new issuances and the refunding. We wanted to separate the two because refunding doesn't have anything to do with that. You're issuing new debt to pay off old debt for a better interest rate. And so the amount on the left column are new issuances that we have. And you can kind of see that it was in that 25, which is where that 14 C and D was a little over 25, and it kind of creeps up, and the larger ones that we are seeing is in the 2018, kind of started with the 45, and then 64 and 84 and now 89 for the different issuances. And we do, if the current CIP plan that was approved in March has a few more large issuances in it, but it starts to taper down in the most recent approved CIP plan.
in 2022,
It starts tapering down. I think this was the last issuance of the larger dollar amount. Now it starts kind of going down by a couple million, and then it goes several, which we can go into. I think it's the next slide. So we have 91, which is a lower tick down, because that last issuance that we had, there were some bond premiums in there as well. So you technically had project funding that we were able to issue less bonds than we needed because of the discount that came in. So in theory, this is about 9 million less than what we needed for funding last year, and then it goes down again about another 10, and then it drops down quite a bit, that 20 million, and then another 15.
But at this rate, this is what is going to require in the out years. I mean, we're looking at 50, 60 cents bump in property tax levy just to do this.
Yes. Granted, some of the things that we see in the, as we look at where local option sales tax falls versus where tax valuations fall, and whether we leaving the debt levy where it's at, will come into play as to where that dollar amount will end up having to be.
But
So our assumptions, we have different valuation assumptions, and what we believe
Right,
is going to be coming
So
in.
if valuations end up worse than your assumptions, then the
It could be
increase
worse.
would be
Yep.
higher.
It would need to be higher, yep.
I mean, so for example, we haven't seen the full impacts of COVID and what that's going to do to downtown real estate. If our assumptions are not accurate there and things are
Mm-hmm.
worse than those assumptions, we're going to have
It could be-
potentially
yep.
even tougher budget decisions to make.
Yes. Yep, and one thing that we have going from the CIP that was approved last year to now is, I think, the most recent valuations is better than what we projected. So we have the opposite side of the coin that we have, I
Right.
think,
So we
right
have a
now.
little bit of leeway with the residential assessment.
Yes.
But in terms of, we still haven't seen the other side of that coin, which is whatever is going to happen with the downtown.
Yeah, yep. And then the other aspect too is the conversations that finance and Scott has about, is there a need for a more pull off the local option sales tax to avoid the levy increase as well in the future?
Say that for me again, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The possibility of needing to pull additional local option sales tax to avoid rate increases as well, more than the 50% that we currently do at
Instead
this
of
point.
putting it in the reserve?
Instead of doing projects or just being able to allocate more than just the 50% to avoid any rates.
But we could pull it out of the reserve.
We could,
Instead
yep.
of cutting projects.
As a one-time, yep, to avoid, yep.
Or we could cut the budget.
Or we could take out projects, yep. But, so this is what we currently have, what was approved in last March, of what we plan for GO bonds being issued over the course of the next couple fiscal years. This goes through the 2026 fiscal year, because we issue in July, August is usually a time frame of when we issue, so it's the next fiscal year. So these are the next 4 issuances that we have. And with that, these issuances, if you take into account what would be issued and what we'd be paying off in that next year, it does show that we get above 80 and then back down, assuming our assumptions on the valuation are this way. And this is kind of a conservative approach. We do on the reassessment year, 3% increase, and on the non-assessment year, 1% increase, and that's the total taxable assumptions. Hold on that.
This shows us in the out years above 80
Yes.
consistently.
It does. And with that, that's why we're trying to evaluate the change in the assessment value. We look at this every year, and this is one where because we did the asset match as well, a lot of our debt is dropping off within 5-10 years, whereas in the past it used to be a flat level 20. We're doing a asset match where we go through all of our projects and adjust that. That started in the 2019 issuances that we did. And so we're seeing the uptick and then the downtick within this current CIP plan. That was approved in March. And this slide we did have in the local option sales tax as well. And this, again, just iterates that blue section is what's been trimmed off because of local option sales tax. And within this current fiscal year 22, that's a $1.84 difference. Long-term issuing challenges, this kind of gives us what is beyond our current CIP plan, what we are currently budgeting or plan for the ongoing CIP projects, which include annual allocations for park infrastructure, street, traffic, fire equipment, and municipal buildings. Those are the kind of the ongoing expenses that we allocate a certain dollar amount every year to be able to do. That ranges in any given year anywhere from 25 to 30 million of issuances to be able to do those ongoing. And what we actually are showing in our model is issuing 30 to 35 in any given year, which allows for that 5 to 10 million a year to go towards new projects or expanding any additional projects.
30 to 35, when the out year, like the lowest we got down to was 43, right?
Yeah, this is after the current CIP, so this starts the fiscal year 2027.
Right, so it would still need to be a lesser spend than what we're
What we're,
anticipating in the,
yep.
like, we're not going to be maintaining the levels in the current CIP.
There's many pressures. There is the debt limit pressure that won't allow us to do that, as well as the being able to pay that debt off. It cannot be, it's not sustainable to keep at that high issuance.
What would be your pressure on the debt limit if the interest rate went to 4%?
If the interest rate goes up, we can't borrow as much. So if interest rates, if that environment skyrockets, then we can't borrow as much because we have to allocate more money towards interest than paying back the principal.
I'm thinking back in the 80s when, it was 10 to 15%?
10, yes.
Yeah, 10.
That's true, yes.
So, just
Yeah,
guessing
we
at 4, that
we
would
work with
severely
PFM.
impact
Yeah,
our
we work.
ability to issue this kind of debt.
Yes, working with PFM, we have their knowledge of what they think the market rate is going to be looking like for interest rates, and that's what we program in as our interest rate assumptions.
Okay. That was why, if I could, Mayor, that this first bullet point is in here, is that we think it's 25 to 30 million of allocations to each of these categories that we would still be making progress on replacing streets and the park equipment. But what we have found most recently is we have added special projects to the capital improvement plan that has taken it well above that amount. And so this is a question of being able to maintain the categories that you see here with the annual necessary amounts that get us to 30 million, and then limiting ourselves to 5, 6, maybe $8 million of other special projects to that amount, and then utilizing sales tax as the
Void in the
pay-go,
issuance. Yep.
beyond that. So then you can start to understand, if we're issuing $35, $38 million a year in bonds, if there are additional projects the council wants to move forward with, it would make sense to then use the sales tax. And then once that's done, then we need to stop there with the capital projects.
But it has to be in the category that we told our residents,
Absolutely. Yep.
Within your
neighborhood improvements, infrastructure, public safety.
Okay.
And these are some of the ones that some upcoming unfunded projects that we're trying to work within the CIP that have not been, that we've always kind of worked through. And this is the stuff that's on the radar for us to look at for the current CIP. And as you can kind of say, it's tough to shuffle these in at this point, but we're trying to figure out our best approach with some of these significant street rebuilds and replacements. That's been something that we added a lot. That's kind of a big contribution of what went higher. And then we've got city facility needs, the soccer expansion, Principal Park, Birdland Marina, and Central Iowa Trails, the city infrastructure that we have to work through as well for those projects.
The city infrastructure, is that what we've already committed to? Like the stuff in the park improvements that we've already committed to, or is this above and beyond that?
Are you talking about the last bullet point?
The last bullet point. I mean, 'cause
This would be new.
We've already put, what, 6, 7 million into?
6, yep.
6 million into projects for water trails, so this is above and beyond that 6.
Yes. This would be the future phases that they're looking at.
Center Street, if they're saying that Center Street will be done within 5 years, or at least have the funding within 5 years, so then we would have to do improvements to the Center Street area, the off-park area where, the attraction's going to be. You're going to have to be able to get in and out of it.
Okay.
At Center Street if they take the dam down. So they're anticipating full funding for that within 5 years. Now, we'll see if that happens. I think that's why Scott has this on here, is because we were informed within 5 years that they would be fully funded and ready to start construction on Center Street.
And how much are they going to be wanting for our portion?
We don't know yet.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't ask for anything for the Center Street, but I think that we've got to be prepared to do the outside
The
park
parking.
improvements and things like that, like we've had to do with Harriet,
Okay.
Prospect, Scott. They're going to want, I mean, we're going to have to do something with the Center Street if and when they do have the money. And it was a no-brainer that they would have it within 5 years is what we were told last Monday.
Well, they also said that it would be, Scott and Center Street would all be complete in 5 years.
I didn't hear the
That's what
Center
they said.
Street. I knew that they would have the money to do it in 5 years. I think they would like to have it complete. So yeah, we have to be prepared within 5 years to make improvements.
Okay.
And that is where the revenue would be generated once Center Street is done. That will help pay for some of the maintenance and things like that. When it is completed, I mean, that is the attraction. That is where the outfitters are gonna go at Birdland, and that is where we will be able to get some money to reinvest and so it doesn't
Attention
cost.
to that area.
Yeah, where it doesn't
But-
cost
so-
just taxpayer dollars.
So some of that, our investment in Birdland?
Yes, those last two could be somewhat combined,
Okay.
somewhat, but
Not
Center Street.
entirely.
yeah.
Yep.
We will get revenue from there also.
Once Center Street's
We'll have revenue
down,
from there.
So we have to be careful there because
Yeah.
the revenue is for maintenance of the downtown sites and the additional operations that they're putting into play. So it really depends on what their final design is, which they're working on now.
And then where is, I mean, the sidewalks somewhere in that street rebuild and replacement are sidewalk dollars?
The 25 to 30 million, that's a given starting point, that's within that number?
That's our 3 million, but if we want to,
Yes.
I mean, if we want to close those sidewalk gaps a little faster,
That's
That-
the first one.
that would, okay. So,
that's the first bullet point.
Yeah, that's essentially streets and anything else that's in
That
addition.
correlates with that, yeah. That's this ST or those type of
we're going
projects.
to continue the level of street investment we're seeing now. This is if we want to go above and beyond that, or this is to, I mean, because we've been doing a lot, and we have a lot programmed into the 5 years, but are we going to fall off? I mean, because we're doing a lot of catch-up, right? I mean, we were at 22% in good or excellent condition. We're pushing that up, but are we going to sort of plateau, or are we still going to be making progress without additional,
We'll definitely be making progress, but
just might slow down?
it would slow down, and the discussion needs to be focused on how much sales tax can we put into it, not bonding funds beyond the 3 million.
Got it. And I mean, bonding, you're doing a multiple of, so, okay.
And as the mayor kind of talked about, our last bond rating, the S&P rating that was issued in August the 16th, this is verbiage out of our credit. What I was trying to highlight there is the debt service carrying charges are approaching high levels. Should planned additional debt materially weaken over its credit profile, we would lower the rating. And just as you were talking about, Mayor, if we do get a lower rating, that means that it's going to cost us more in interest as well. So we are very conscientious of that as well, and they've pointed out to us in the last couple of times our bond rating is approaching high levels, and so we have to be very cognizant of that so that we can keep so that we can try and keep our bond rating where it's at, so it doesn't affect our ability to borrow at the good interest rates that we are currently receiving.
Right, so that, I mean, it's not just the interest rates that could affect where we're at. If we keep issuing debt at the level we're issuing, we're not going to get as good an interest rate even if it's out there.
Yep, that's why we are, when we go through the conversations with S&P and the rating agencies, when we do this, they saw that we had a higher level, but they saw our down ticking as well in our CIP plan. So they are aware of what our current CIP plan shows and where we intend to go. So at this point, we're trying to stay as close to that as possible going forward. Any other questions on bonds and our debt management as we go into the budget cycle, where we're kind of setting that stage so that you know what we're looking at and what we're working on with the budget?
Question for Scott. Do you have any updates on our federal dollars that we've received?
No updates from Treasury on the language and the flexibility that we've requested. However, we have done some reporting and we are now comfortable between finance and myself in coming to council here real soon with a first small allocation. When I say small, 12 to 15 million of those funds that we are confident, based on the existing rules, can be utilized for governmental purposes, or I think is the term they used.
Governmental.
I saw an article in the paper today where it said cities are asking the Treasury to
Yes.
loosen up some of their guidelines.
Yeah, there were other entities that had very similar language that we submitted during the comment process. And so it's not just us that has that
Yeah.
question, but they did open up another window of comments at this point where they're asking for federal agencies and citizens to comment now as well, not just the entities that were affected.
Okay.
So they're trying to get some additional input.
As we talk about spending those dollars, I know the county's had some public forums or public workshops. Do you see us doing the same thing and seeing what the residents would like it to be spent on before we act on it?
Yep.
Yep.
And then
I think we're going to incorporate that with the budget webinar that we did last year in December, doing that as one of the big components of that.
Then you'll have guidelines what it can and can't be spent on.
Hopefully,
Laid
yeah.
out for
Maybe.
the public so they understand.
right.
Depends on what the feds do.
Mayor, I do have one other item, if I can, just real quickly. It was asked about our October 27th council work session. We do have a full day scheduled for that. Just real quick, I can give a rundown of what that's anticipated to be. For topics, we have NFC coming in to give an update, as well as Invest DSM. So they'll be giving us updates, and then it'll roll right into the conversation we just had this morning on neighborhood grants for the entire city, to give you an update on those projects. So we'll have that right back at you on October 27th. And then we also have the Complete Streets report, a report on the Food Security Task Force as they're finishing up some of their work. We have another topic with finance on the TIF aspects and some of the actually very dramatic reductions in the Des Moines, the tax rate that the school district is experiencing. So there's some good news within that, but it also brings forward some challenges when it comes to TIF. We have the economic development strategies discussion that was asked by the council to look at how would we even go about more proactive economic development instead of simply looking at more what comes in from developers and from TIF districts that already exist. We have performance measures that we'll be talking about, and civil service process, the Vision Zero concept and what we're trying to do there. And then lastly, we have the Youth Advisory Board through the Civil and Human Rights Commission that will come in at the end of that afternoon. So where we have typically maybe run early and gotten out, I do ask that council be prepared to stick in here till probably the 4 o'clock range at the end of that day, if you would. So,
And we'll meet here.
yes.
And Scott, I can't speak for everybody, but I think it works well for me that, can we make that a working lunch as well?
We can.
Because, I mean, we can listen, we can eat at the same time. I can even walk and chew bubble gum at the same time.
Yep. We'll have the preparers ready to be available in case we're running a few minutes early as well. Thank you.
Good.
All right, anybody have anything else? All right, this meeting's adjourned. We'll see you all at what time tonight?
We're pausing at 4:45.
Okay, but nothing from you
There's no closed session.
No closed session. All right, we'll see you all.
That article, that Amazon, I got nothing.